I will start at the end, because that is the part you most need to hear. My name is Rowan Hale, and if my voice reaches you now, then the story did not die on that cliff. You might know me already from a channel called Midnight Findings, a late-night parade of haunted houses, cursed dolls, and abandoned tunnels. We laughed, we screamed on cue, we stitched together jump cuts and fake blood, and we told ourselves it was all only entertainment. The night at Blackwater Infirmary began as just another stunt, another desperate push for views when the numbers started sliding the wrong way. It ended with me walking out alone into the cold light of dawn, and the others never walking out at all. This recording is not an episode, and it is not a game, and if you listen to it to the end, you will understand why I am afraid for you as much as I am afraid for myself. Before the hospital, there were 4 of us, and we had a rhythm as familiar as any old song. Jess handled the cameras and cuts, sharp eyes, sharper tongue, always looking for an angle no one else had noticed. Malik was our believer, our walking nerve ending, ready to jump at every creak, and Shadow even, when the floorboards were clearly modern plywood. Priya was the newest voice, a clever nursing student who could point at an old iron bed frame and tell you which century the rust belonged to. I planned the shoots, negotiated with sponsors, smiled at the thumbnails, and pretended I was not measuring every scream in watch time and retention graphs. When the email about Blackwater came in, it sounded at first like any other proposal that lands in a heart-shaped inbox. An agency wanted a 12-hour live stream from a decommissioned hospital on the North Coast, all access, full rights, generous payment if we could hold an audience past midnight. There was a catch, naturally, because there is always a catch when someone offers too much for too little. Blackwater Infirmary sat on a cliff above a town that hardly appeared on maps anymore, the Victorian isolation ward built for diseases that left families whispering and churches fuller than usual. The building had been abandoned for decades, beaten by sea, wind and neglect, and now the council had finally signed off on demolition. The agency wanted us to stream during the final night, wall still standing, ghosts still, unsettled, air filled with dust that had once been breath. I should have deleted the email and taken a week off, but there is a kind of hunger that does not understand the word enough. When I told the others, they did not hesitate long.
A full night in a Victorian plague box on a cliff sounds like the perfect way to get cancelled in 3 countries and monetised in 10.
Hospitals creep me out, but abandoned hospitals on cliffs are a different league.
If the structure is really that old, the architecture alone could work as a history feature.
We talked for an hour about ethics, or we pretended to, while keeping half an eye on the potential subscriber curve in our imaginations. In the end, we signed the contract and booked a rented van, because there is no simple way to refuse a ghost when its hand is made of money. The road north wound through fields like pages torn from a history book, hedges clawing at the sky, stone walls leaning under the weight of centuries. Rain chased us for most of the drive, smearing the horizon into a single grey smear until the sat-nav announced Blackwater Bay in a bright automatic voice that did not match the place at all. The town huddled in the curve of the bay, a scatter of slate roofs and dark windows, the harbour half choked with weed and tired boats. Above it all, set on the lip of a jagged cliff, rose the hospital, 4 stories of weathered brick and empty glass looking out over the violent sea. From the road it resembled a face that had forgotten how to blink.
That is one ugly beauty.
I can feel my lungs tightening just looking at it.
Isolation hospitals were usually built away from towns.
The agency had told us that a caretaker would meet us with keys and final warnings, and they were not entirely wrong. He was waiting by the gate when we stepped out, a thin man in an old wool coat, hair like sea foam, eyes like stones left too long underwater.
You must be the ones who like to stay up late with the dead.
I stepped forward with my friendliest handshake and my most professional smile, the one I used on sponsors who wanted fear, but not scandal. I told him our names, our schedule, our promise not to damage anything that the wrecking crews had not already claimed, and he listened without nodding.
Iron Tarot. I keep an eye on the place until they knock it down, and the place keeps an eye on me.
He reached into his coat and produced a heavy ring of keys, each one a different shape of iron and history.
There are some runes you will not need to see.
The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt and rust and something faintly medicinal that might have been memory.
Stay away from the sea wing. The doors there have been sealed for a reason, and that black glass at the end of the corridor has been hungry for too long.
The phrase black glass lodged in my mind like grit under a contact lens.
We will be careful.
Is it structural damage or something else?
The fire was in that wing, but the bricks are not the ones that whisper.
He pressed the keys into my hand and closed my fingers around them, his grip surprisingly strong.
You can point your cameras where you like, but do not stand long in front of the glass, and do not open what has forgotten how to be opened.
It is astonishing how quickly human beings can turn a warning into a marketing hook when there is a camera involved. We carried gear through the gates, wheels bumping over gravel cables coiled like sleeping snakes in Jess's arms.
We should get a wide shot from down here before we go inside.
Chat is going to explode when they see this.
Some of the windows have old safety mesh in the glass.
Inside, the air was colder than outside, as if the walls still clung to a temperature chart from another century. The entrance hall smelled of damp plaster, old smoke, and the faint metallic tang that lingers in old medical buildings long after the last patient has left. Tiles were cracked underfoot, but the pattern of pale crosses remained, marching toward reception desks that no longer held forms or pens. We set up the main camera facing the hall, with a second rig rolling for safety, wireless mics checked, power banks stacked like playing cards on a broken chair.
Audio levels are good, light is atmospheric but workable, and if anything moves in that doorway we will have it on at least 3 angles.
I want at least one moment where I scream and embarrass myself.
If this floor gives way, the comments will not matter.
When we went live, it felt at first like every other stream we had done, which is to say, like walking onto a stage where the audience is invisible, but vividly present. Screens blinked, indicator lights glowed, and within seconds the viewer count began to climb in the corner of Jess's monitor. We greeted countries represented by username and flag emoji. We welcomed all subscribers back, and we tried not to stare too long at the number of anonymous eyes that had tuned in just to watch strangers in the dark. I introduced the location, with my best storyteller cadence feeding them the history we had researched and the rumours we had embellished. Blackwater Infirmary opened in the late 19th century as a place to send the contagious and the inconvenient, the building designed for distance rather than comfort. Boats brought fevers and coughing fits from bigger cities, and the town on the base sent them up the hill and hoped never to see them again. There had been a fire, I told them, late in the building's history, and the official records said that the casualty count was low, which meant that the unofficial count was not. The sea wing had taken most of the damage, and after that night it had been locked and bricked and forgotten, at least on paper. In reality, a story is never forgotten while someone can still profit from telling it.
We have permission to explore everywhere except the sealed part of the sea wing.
Which obviously means we will not go anywhere near it.
We will respect the building and the people who suffered here.
The chat flooded the screen with reactions, a digital tide of dares and warnings and jokes about plagues and curses. I watched one comment slide past that read, in clear white letters on a dark background, "Stay and be seen," and in that moment it felt like nothing more than a viewer trying out a phrase to see if it would stick. We started in the lower wards, rooms where beds still stood, stripped of mattresses, but not of atmosphere. Walls were staying in patterns that might have been damp or memory, and metal brackets protruded where equipment once had hung.
You can almost hear the coughing if you close your eyes.
Isolation meant long nights and not enough nurses.
Camera 1, get a slow push past that doorway.
In an old chart room we found cardboard files swollen with damp, names written in looping ink that the water had tried to erase. One ledger in particular still held its spine, thick with lined pages, and the first time I opened it a small puff of ancient dust rose like a ghost trying on the idea of form. The handwriting inside was tight and disciplined, notes on symptoms and responses, pulse rates and temperatures, refusals and outbreaks. The deeper we read, the less it looked like care and the more it looked like experiment.
This entry references induced sleep deprivation. They kept patients awake for nights just to see how their minds would break, and they called it observation.
People watched us get sick on stream last year and called it content.
Another page mentioned the sea wing specifically, noting that certain patients were moved there because their conditions were deemed valuable, not in terms of survival, but in terms of data. At the bottom of one page, in a different hand, were the words, "They do not sleep when they are watched, and they do not die when they are counted." I remember closing the ledger with more force than necessary, the covers slapping together like a neglected heartbeat. It did not take long for the chat to start asking when we would go to the damaged wing, because audiences have a flawless instinct for the edge of any cliff. They sent messages saying that nothing interesting ever happens in safe hallways, that we were cowards if we stayed where the lights still worked, that real horror required risk.
We did promise we would not cross any bricked thresholds.
We did not promise anything about standing near them and getting very close.
We will respect the building and still show them enough for the story.
The number in the corner of the screen climbed with every teasing mention of the sea wing, and in my chest something old and human and greedy stirred.
When I suggested a compromise, I heard my own voice sounding like a stranger.
We would not break down walls or tamper with structural work, I said, but if there was a door that still swung on its hinges, and if it led only to a corridor that was technically still part of the building, we might show it to them. The chat exploded in approval, and a few usernames repeated the phrase "stay and be seen" until it began to look less like a playful line and more like a banner. The sea wing corridor waited on the top floor, and climbing toward it felt like moving inside a throat that did not want to swallow. The walls grew darker with smoke stains, and the smell changed from damp to something sharper, a phantom of burned paint and old flesh that rose under every step. At the start of the corridor, a blackened door bore a sign half melted from the fire, the letters "C" and something else warped beyond recognition. At the far end, the wall shone. The glass that caretaker Caro had mentioned was wider than our van and taller than a person, set into the brick like an eye that someone had forgotten to close. It was not transparent, not reflective in the way a normal mirror is, but a deep surface that drank light and offered nothing back.
That is not normal security glass.
It looks like the one-way observation panels they use in interrogation rooms, only this one does not seem interested in physics.
This is the thumbnail.
Even off camera, I could not look at the panel for long without feeling an odd prickling in my teeth and fingertips, as if every nerve that had ever been seen by someone else was waking up. The door to the observation room stood just to one side, charred around the edges but still whole, its handle a blackened arc of metal. We argued quietly for a moment off mic about whether we should go inside, and every argument for caution sounded thinner than the crack in the ceiling plaster.
If we hit 100,000 live viewers in this stream, Rowan will stand alone in the observation room with everything off except his camera for 5 minutes.
The words dropped into the stream like a stone into a still pond, and the ripples were immediate. New viewers poured in, old ones shared links, the chat filled with bets and demands, and the number in the corner began to race toward a figure that had lived only in our trafficking dreams.
You do not have to do it.
We can find another stunt.
In my ear, a phantom of a sponsor's voice reminded me of contracts and exposure and the phrase "once-in-a-lifetime opportunity."
I smiled at the camera because that was the mass people trusted. I told them that if they really wanted it, I would give them those 5 minutes. The number rolled past the target as if it had never been a limit at all. The corridor became a staging area, cables snaking away behind us, the main camera on a tripod capturing the door, a body cam strapped tight across my chest prepared to give the audience my eyes.
We will keep the corridor lit so the stream does not cut to black completely, but the observation room will be yours and the dark.
I will count down from 5 once you're inside.
Please do not stand too close to the glass.
I went in anyway, because this is the part where the horror fans lean forward and the rational minds lean back and see who will win. The observation room was narrower than I had expected, more like a passage wedged between walls than a proper chamber. The glass filled almost the entire inner wall, framed by thick iron, and from this side it was the same black depth as from the corridor.
I stood in front of it with the camera on my chest and my torch extinguished, the only light spilling in under the door behind me. The air tasted stale and metallic, like breath that had been exhaled and trapped a long time ago.
We are at 5 minutes on the timer. In 3, 2, 1.
When the corridor lights went out and the faint strip under the door vanished, the black before me became absolute. I have been in caves and tunnels where darkness feels thick, but this was something else, as if all the light had been extracted, leaving only the pressure where it had once been.
For the first minute nothing happened, which is sometimes the worst thing in a haunted place because it gives your mind time to offer suggestions.
My heart beat loud enough that I was sure the microphone was picking it up, and I found myself wondering how many people were listening to that rhythm around the world at that precise second. That was when the chat began to talk about things I could not see. Later, when I watched the recording, I saw the comments pouring over the video in a stream too fast for any one human eye to truly track. I saw people typing that there was a figure standing directly behind me, just on the other side of the glass, tall and still and entirely without a face. I heard my own breath on the recording, steady and oblivious, and it made my skin crawl. At the time, all I felt was the first tickle of another kind of attention, a prickling not on my skin, but behind my eyes. It felt like the sensation of walking into a room where a conversation stops and everyone pretends it had never been happening. Only here, there were no footsteps and no rustle of clothing, just a sudden density in the air, as if more minds were now sharing it. My earpiece crackled, and for a moment I heard Jess saying my name, but the sound folded into static before it became words. I lifted my hand slowly, more to prove to myself that I still existed than for the sake of the stream, and held it out toward the glass without touching it. The temperature dropped in a way that had nothing to do with drafts or insulation. It was the drop of a fever breaking, the snap from sweating heat to hollow chill that makes patients gasp. Somewhere in that black surface something moved. I could not see it, and yet I knew. Pressure shifted, like a crowd leaning closer to hear a whispered secret. A murmur crept in at the edges of my hearing, not in my ears, but in the part of the brain that listens when you dream. It sounded like many voices failing to agree on a word. Then they did agree. In unison, inside my head and inside the memory of every page in that ledger, I heard the words "stay and be seen." I did not answer aloud, which may be the only brave thing I did that night. Instead, I stumbled back until my shoulders hit the door, my fingers fumbling for the handle that felt as if it had grown a crust of frost in seconds. When the corridor lights came up again, the glass returned to being just glass, and my friend stared at me with eyes wider than the lens that had been watching.
You are white as the tiles downstairs.
The comments are going wild.
Your hand is freezing.
I told them that it had been cold and strange, but survivable, because admit the first truth and you will have to follow it with all the others. We decided to do one more short pass along the sea wing corridor for the stream, because we were still thinking like creators and not like patients. That was when the first sound came from behind the walls. It was not the usual creak of settling timbers or the crack of cooling metal, but a thin rhythmic knocking like knuckles on glass.
Please tell me that is the wind.
The observation rooms were used for night checks.
If this is a loop of some old structural noise, we will enhance it in post and it will be incredible.
The knocking continued, never louder, never closer, as dependable as a heartbeat on a monitor. The chat filled with messages spelling out the taps, people turning the rhythm into jokes and memes before the echo had even faded.
Among them, the familiar phrase returned, typed by usernames I did not recognize and yet felt I should.
Say and be seen. We did not know then that the audience was already part of the experiment. Signals travel both ways in any system, and the act of watching is a kind of invitation. From here, the timeline becomes slippery in my head, as if the hours of that night were shuffled while I was still living them. I remember moving through lower corridors again, and I remember that the hospital seemed to shift subtly each time we came back to the same junction. Signs pointed in directions that had just been blocked, doors appeared where there had been blank wall, the building rearranging its own logic.
I swear we passed that rusted trolley already.
Old hospitals can feel like mazes when you are tired.
The map shows a simple grid, but this place does not care about diagrams.
Doors we left open were closed when we returned, and doors we had closed for safety stood ajar as if someone had passed through behind us.
Each time, when we checked the stream delay, the feed showed all doors exactly as we remembered leaving them. There is a special kind of fear that comes from seeing your memory contradicted by your own recorded image. At some point in those hours, Jess left us in search of a stronger signal.
The connection is flaking. I need to reset the router we set up near the stairwell.
Do not go alone.
Take the walkie-talkie and give 3 short calls if anything weird happens.
You 3 stay here and do something harmless for 5 minutes so the audience does not get bored.
That was the last time I saw her face in person. On the recording, you can hear her footsteps receding, then a faint laugh at some comment in her earpiece, then the sound is absorbed by the building. We filled the gap with lighter content, reading names from the chat, answering questions about equipment, anything to keep momentum.
Someone wants to know if we get scared after streams or only during them.
He read out a comment that said, in polite but insistent letters, "We will stay as long as you are seen." After 7 minutes, Jess had not returned.
She is probably wrestling with cables somewhere.
She picked up the walkie-talkie and tried calling anyway. The device hissed and crackled, and for a moment I thought I heard Jess answering, but instead of words there was only the faint sound of many people breathing. Then someone whispered "stay and be seen" in a voice that belonged to more than one mouth. The walkie-talkie went dead in Priya's hand, its indicator light still on, its batteries still full, its usefulness drained. Malik decided to check the stairwell, because in horror stories someone always decides to check the stairwell.
I will go and drag her back on camera, and we will all have a good laugh and the view count will spike.
We will keep the stream going from here and stay in sight of the main entrance.
I stayed near the tripod where the main camera faced the hall because someone had to remain where the audience expected us to be. On the recording, Malik walks into the shadow at the top of the stairs and does not come back. There is no scream, no sudden crash, nothing that would satisfy the part of you that demands spectacle as proof of horror. He simply passes beyond the edge of the frame like anyone walking out of the room. Priya watched the monitor and frowned.
He should still be in range.
I called his name, my voice sounding empty in the hall. The only answer was the faint knocking from the direction of the C wing, still patient, still regular, still insisting. The chat, which had been screaming excited jokes and panicked emojis when Jess first left, began to quiet. New lines appeared that did not match the normal rhythm of online speech. There were full sentences with careful punctuation written as if the writer were used to making notes on serious matters. They said things like 7 subjects in observation, 4 still ambulant, 2 awaiting discharge. They said things like subject refuses to sleep, while observed subject exhibits heightened awareness of being watched. Among them, always returning, was stay and be seen. Priya scrolled through the earlier chat history and paled.
These names match the ledger downstairs.
I told her that it had to be a viewer with access to a copy of the public records, someone playing a cruel joke. I told myself that because the alternative was that the observation did not end when the building closed. I do not know when Priya left my side. One moment she stood beside the tripod reading the comments, the next moment the camera showed only the hole and my own uncertain shape. On the audio you can hear a soft chime like the ones monitors make when a pulse drops to 0, overlaid on the sound of the sea battering the cliff. Then there's that phrase again, not whispered, not shouted, just present in the room. Say and be seen. After that, the memory turns to fragments stitched together by recordings and fear. I ran through corridors that no longer followed the blueprint, doors slamming or opening out of sequence, stairs leading to landings that ended in blank walls. My voice calling the names of my friends sounded like someone else's voice dubbed onto the footage. Sometimes I saw movement at the edge of my vision, shapes in white gowns slipping through doorways, bare feet leaving no sound on the floor. When I swung the camera toward them, there was nothing there except peeling paint and the echo of my own breath. Once in the reflection of a small cracked window, I saw not my face but 4 figures standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the black glass at the end of the C wing. They stood perfectly still, their heads turned toward where I would have been, in the corridor, even though my body was several floors away. Their outlines were correct, their height and build matching Jess and Malik and Priya and myself. Their faces, however, were not faces. They were blank surfaces, smooth as the black glass, featureless and yet somehow full of attention. I blinked, and the window went back to showing only the storm and the tide lights of the town below. At some point the stream cut out for the viewers, though the cameras kept recording. The agency later told me that the feed froze on an image of the C-wing corridor with no one in it. The last comment they saw on their dashboard was a single line. Say and be seen. Eventually I found the main doors. I do not remember locating them or choosing the way, only that one moment I was running past more endless wards and the next my hands were on cold metal push bars. They gave under my weight, and I burst out into rain and grey light and the taste of air that had not yet passed through someone else's lungs. I collapsed on the gravel outside, the cameras still strapped to me, the microphones still live as if I were a piece of equipment abandoned by a careless crew. The town's emergency services arrived because the agency panicked when they lost the stream and could not reach us. They searched the hospital for hours, but they did not find Jess or Malik or Priya. They did find the ledger in the chart room, and a few scattered personal items including a silver ring engraved with letters that had almost worn away. The reports say that structural damage and confusion in the dark may have led to falls or entrapment, and that the building is full of hidden voids where people could become lost. They do not mention the way the glass felt like an eye or the way the air spoke, because there is no form for those details. The stream, incomplete as it was, exploded after the incident. Clips of me standing in the observation room travel faster than the official statements, and strangers who had never watched our channel before became armchair investigators overnight. They replayed frames, isolated shadows, wrote threads about the ethics of broadcasting from a place where people had once died, and all the while the view counts climbed. The agency wanted to spin the whole thing into a branded documentary, something about survivor guilt and the weight of digital memory. I refused, or I thought I refused. In truth, some part of me kept feeding the story by reading every comment, every theory, every mention of Blackwater. The more people watched, the more I felt that prickling behind my eyes, that sense of being counted. At night, when I closed my lids, I saw the slow blink of unseen watchers row upon row behind the black glass. During one of those nights, unable to sleep, I opened the stream archive and scrolled through the chat again, line by line. Among the nonsense and the jokes, I saw them. Names that matched the ledger downstairs, writing in a style that did not belong to the internet. They thanked us for giving them new eyes, the eyes of our viewers. They wrote that observation had always been the key, that disease and fear and guilt had tied them to the building, but the building was no longer necessary. They could now inhabit any place where attention flowed like blood. All they needed was someone to carry the story out into the open and tell it in enough detail that strangers would consent to listen. They needed someone to be both subject and observer.
They needed someone like me.
I would like to say that I deleted everything then and there, went to the authorities, and never touched a camera again. Instead, I watched the viewer count tick up but on the archive and told myself that at least their deaths would not be meaningless if people remembered their names.
The phrase "stay and be seen" came back to me like a pulse.
That is why I am recording this now, on a different device, in a different room, with no live feed and no chat, only your ears at the other end of the line.
You did not ask to be part of this, and you have every right to be angry with me for letting the story travel this far.
I need you to understand something, though.
Stories are doors,
And listening is a way of opening them. When you press play on this video, you stepped onto the threshold. You joined a chain of eyes stretching back to the night when the first patient lay awake in Blackwater, staring at the black glass and feeling themselves counted. Every second you keep listening, you participate in a ritual older than streaming and newer than the last comment left under a clip. They have learned to move where the attention goes. Right now, that attention includes you. I can feel them gathering as I speak, the same way I felt them in that room, only now they come through screens and headphones instead of hospital walls. I am not telling you this to frighten you, though fright is inevitable at this point. I am telling you because understanding is the only defense we have left.
When you finish this story, you must decide what to do with it.
If you close the window and never think of Blackwater again, perhaps the line will stop with you and the glass will fog over once more.
If you share it, if you talk about it, if you clip it and quote it and turn it into content, you will invite them into new rooms.
They will not scratch at your doors or pull at your blankets in the night, at least not at first.
They will watch you when you forget that cameras exist. They will stand just out of frame when you glance up from your phone and feel that you are not alone. They will whisper "stay" and be seen in the hum of your devices and the scroll of your timelines.
I cannot tell you what to choose.
I am already too much a part of this experiment, the subject who walks out of the building carrying their gaze inside his skull. I can only offer you this small mercy. You know now, in a way that the patients never did, that you are being counted.
You can decide whether you want to give them your time voluntarily or deny them that measure.
Before I let you go, I need to speak to you in a different tone, one that belongs not to Rowan the unfortunate survivor, but to the voice of this channel you have chosen to visit tonight.
Thank you for staying with this tale all the way to the end, for walking with me through the empty halls and out onto the wet gravel of the morning.
If the story held you, if you felt the chill of the glass and the pull of the unseen eyes, it would mean a great deal if you could show it.
Please consider pressing the like button so others can find their way here and stand with us in the dim corridors of quick ghost stories.
If you have not joined us before, you can subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next time we open a door together and listen to what waits behind it. I would love to read your thoughts and theories in the comments, especially your own ideas about what really happened in Blackwater and whether the story should ever be told again. If you would like to support the channel more directly, you can use the QR code in the corner of the video or follow the donation link in the description to help keep these midnight explorations alive. In the description you will also find links to other works from entirely different series, journeys into other shadows, and other kinds of hauntings for the nights when you are ready for something new.
For now, I will thank you once more for listening, wish you a safe walk from the screen to the light switch, and invite you back next time you feel like staying up with the ghosts.
Until the next story, sleep gently, look over your shoulder only when you truly need to, and remember that some things can be forgotten if we let them fade.